Hello, this is My Sweet Mess, and welcome to my kitchen, where every week I make a mess trying new recipes in the pursuit of something sweet. This week, I am excited to try a new to me recipe for Easter Peeps Cake from Diana at Little Sunny Kitchen, and I'll leave a link to the original recipe in the show notes below. I'm a little intimidated by this bake. This is going to be my first ever tiered cake, but everything looked so fun, so I couldn't pass up the opportunity to make this for a family get-together. So follow along as I try my first tiered cake ever. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's jump right into this bake. Let's get started with our mise en place. Mise en place is a French term for putting in place or everything in its place. It's the process of preparing your tools and ingredients before you get started with your bake. For this recipe, we have 3 elements: the cake, the vanilla buttercream frosting, and the decorations. For the cake, we need unsalted butter softened, granulated sugar, eggs, buttermilk, vanilla, all-purpose flour, baking powder, baking soda, salt, and gel food coloring in pink, yellow, and blue. I'm not going to measure my gel food coloring out. I'm just going to keep the bottles handy, and that way I can customize the colors based on my preferences once it gets time to dye our batter. For our vanilla buttercream frosting, we need unsalted butter softened, powdered sugar, vanilla, salt, and heavy whipping cream. For our decorations, and these are all totally optional, I'm going to use 24 Peeps. I've got 3 boxes here, yellow, pink, and blue, and they each have 8, which gives me my 24. And I chose to use the yellow, pink, and blue so it'll match the inside of my cake. You also need some coconut dyed green. Again, optional. I know everyone's not a fan of coconut. And 1 bag of mini eggs. So this is all of the ingredients we need to make our Peeps cake. I'm going to set these aside for later, and let's walk through our equipment. To begin, we need to preheat the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. We will also need 3 9-inch cake pans. I've got my 1 cake pan here and then the other 2 over there, and I went ahead and prepped all 3. So I've got a light layer of butter and then a light layer of flour on the inside of each pan. And then I also went ahead and cut out 3 parchment paper circles to go in the bottom of the pan. Something else I wanted to call out is I chose pans with nice flat sides, which should hopefully make getting the cakes out of the pans much easier. We will also need a stand mixer fitted with the paddle attachment, a couple of bowls. We'll need a large bowl and a sifter, a couple of spatulas, a measuring cup. This is what I'm going to use to distribute the batter amongst the 3 bowls so that each layer of my cake is identical in size. We'll also need a cooling rack, a piping bag, and a large round tip. This piping tip is what I'll use to put buttercream between each layer. I'm also going to select a decorative tip so that I can pipe some buttercream dollops on top of my cake. Now that all of my ingredients are measured out and my equipment is prepped, let's get started with our bake. To begin, we are going to sift together our dry ingredients. So with our large bowl and sifter set over top, we will add in our all-purpose flour, baking soda, baking powder, and salt. And using one of our spatulas, we will simply coax that through the sifter. And I apologize if you can hear my dogs. They're having the best day and wanting to tell me all about it. And that looks pretty good to me, so I'm just going to set our dry ingredients to the side until we need them later on. Using either a stand mixer or an electric hand mixer, we are going to cream together the butter and the sugar. So into the bowl we have our butter, and I'm going to go ahead and turn my mixer on and start creaming that butter, and then I'll slowly add in the sugar. Now that the butter and sugar have been creamed together, I'm going to add in the eggs one at a time. But before I do that, I've got my spatula here and I'm actually going to scrape down the bottom and the sides of the bowl. So I'm going to turn this back on to medium speed and then add in the eggs one at a time, making sure that the egg is fully combined with the butter and the sugar before I add the next one. Our last thing to do is add in the vanilla. So into the bowl goes the vanilla. I'm going to get our vanilla combined with the rest of the ingredients, and then when I come back, it'll be time to add in our dry ingredients. So now it's time to fold in the dry ingredients and our buttermilk with the existing batter. As you can see, I took my bowl off of this stand mixer and I'm going to fold these ingredients in just by hand because I don't want the batter to get over mixed, and I feel like I'll have more control over how much mixing the batter gets by doing it by hand. So into the bowl goes our first round of dry ingredients. So I'm just scooping from the bottom and lifting the batter up, trying to make the most out of every movement. Okay, and that looks just barely combined, so I'm gonna add in a little bit of our buttermilk. This particular recipe did not say to end with dry ingredients, but in other recipes that I've made, it has asked to end with some dry ingredients. So I'm just gonna save a little bit of that. That looks just barely combined. So into the bowl goes the buttermilk, and that should be the end of my buttermilk. And I'm gonna go ahead and add in the last bit of our dry ingredients. And again, we're trying not to overmix here, but it's a balance certainly of mixing all of the ingredients in together, getting everything from the bottom and the sides of the bowl without over mixing it. That's why I wanted to mix this by hand, is just so that I could be in a little bit more control of how much stirring the batter is gonna get. All right, and that looks pretty good to me. Everything looks well combined. So now it is time to divide our batter. Now that our batter is done, we need to divide it evenly between our 3 different bowls. What you could do is weigh the total amount of batter, divide that number by 3, and then you'll know how much each bowl needs to hold. What I'm going to do is use a measuring cup and then scoop and divide into each of the 3 bowls equally that way. My batter is evenly divided amongst our 3 bowls, so now I'm going to add a few drops of the gel food coloring to each individual bowl. So this one will be our pink bowl. And I'm going to start off pretty conservatively with the colors because, as we know, gel food coloring can be pretty potent stuff. Okay. Something to consider when you're adding your food coloring to your bowls is that the cake layers will bake darker than what you're seeing in the bowls. As I'm adding food coloring to my batter here, I'm trying to keep in mind that this is a Peeps Cake. So what does a peep color look like? It's very bright, it's very vibrant. So I want my cake layers to reflect that. Stirring in the food coloring would be a great opportunity to get helping hands involved in making this cake. As long as you hold on to the food coloring, you should be okay. And don't these colors look so fun? I am so excited to see how these turn out. Now that my colors are nicely mixed into the batter, let's get them into our cake pans. So all of our cake layers are in their pans and they are ready to go into our preheated 350-degree oven for about 20 to 25 minutes, or until a toothpick comes out clean when inserted into the middle of the cake. So I will be back once our cakes are out of the oven. All of our cakes are out of the oven. They're looking great and they smell fantastic. So what I'm gonna do now is just let these guys hang out in their pans for about 10 minutes, and then I'll pop them on our cooling rack and let them cool completely. So I'll come back once our cakes are completely cooled. My cakes have cooled completely, and don't they look great? I love how the colors came out, and I noticed that The blue one and the pink one, I guess even the yellow one, has a little bit of browning on the top and the edges of the cake, but I'm not too worried about that. Once it comes time for stacking the cake, I'll level this off a little bit so some of those spots will actually be cut off from the cake. And as far as the edges go, I'm definitely not worried because a nice layer of buttercream will cover that up and no one will be the wiser. So now that my cakes are completely cooled, I kind of have two options here for where to go next. I can either move forward with stacking and decorating my cake, or I can put it in the freezer. In preparation for the bake, I did a little bit of research to see what the pros and other home bakers recommend. And the universal recommendation that I was seeing is that you need to bake your cake layers a day or two ahead of time. So that's what I did. I am not going to decorate the cake today. I'm actually going to save that for another day. What I'm going to do, based on the recommendations of everything that I was reading, is wrap each cake layer in a layer of plastic wrap and then a layer of aluminum foil and pop them in the freezer. Now I'm going to put them in the freezer because it helps to maintain the moisture. Another benefit of freezing your cake layers is it makes it so much easier when it comes time to decorate. All of that being said, I'm gonna go ahead, get these cakes wrapped up, pop them in the freezer, and then I'll be back in a day or two to make some buttercream and decorate these cakes. And I'm back! It's day 2 here for our Peeps Cake bake. I've got my cakes hanging out behind me on the countertop. They are still wrapped in our plastic wrap and foil, so they are ready to go when it comes time to decorate the cake, which means it's time to make our vanilla buttercream. Using either an electric hand mixer or a stand mixer fitted with the paddle attachment, we are going to cream together our softened butter. I'm going to turn the machine on to about medium speed and let it go for about a minute or a minute and a half just to whip some air into the butter. Then I will gradually add in the powdered sugar, about a half a cup at a time until all the powdered sugar has been added. By adding the powdered sugar slowly, it helps to ensure a smooth texture for our frosting. It also allows the sugar to dissolve properly and helps our buttercream achieve a light and fluffy consistency. Don't forget to stop and scrape down the bottom and the sides of the bowl a few times throughout this process. With me adding the last little bit of powdered sugar, I'm going to go ahead and let my mixer run for about a minute just to make sure that the powdered sugar and the butter are thoroughly incorporated. Once all of the powdered sugar and butter have been added and the buttercream is well mixed up, let's go ahead and add in our vanilla extract, salt, and heavy cream. And we're going to turn the mixer back on to a low speed until our buttercream is nice and smooth and those added ingredients are well incorporated. And it's at this point that you can adjust your buttercream to your preference. If you think the buttercream is a bit on the thin side, you can add more powdered sugar. Now that my buttercream is to my liking, I've got the piping bag and nice round tip from earlier. And I'm just going to fill the piping bag with about a quarter of the buttercream. So that looks pretty good. So I'm actually just going to set this aside for later and get my cakes prepped for our cake stand. So we have our cakes that we made a couple of days ago that have been hanging out in the freezer. And what I'm gonna do is take a look at these guys and see if they need to be leveled or not. And to be honest, they kind of do, but I'm not going to. And the reason why is these cakes are kind of on the thin side, if you can see. And so I'm worried that if I try to level them off, I'm actually going to lose too much cake. So I'm just going to leave them as they are. If you want to level your cakes, that's absolutely fine. I would recommend using a serrated knife to level them out and just be really careful and conservative as you're cutting the tops of your cake off. But I'm going to go ahead and leave them just as they are, and I hope that it all works out. Now that my cakes are ready to go, it's time for the nerve-wracking part. Let's build our layer cake. Okay, So like I said, I have never decorated a tiered cake before, so I went online and found some things that should hopefully make this a little bit easier. I have a cake stand here that moves, and this will be what I decorate the cake on, a offset spatula, and a cake round. A cake round is what I'll actually decorate the cake on, and then once it's done, I can move it off of my turning cake stand and put it on something a little bit more decorative. And before we get started, if you don't have any of these things, which like I said, I didn't until I decided to try this recipe, just use a flat platter or a plate that is large enough for your cakes to sit as flat as possible, and you'll be totally fine. I'm just going to place a small amount of icing there on the bottom, and that's, I think it is to help keep your cakes from sliding around. So what I'm going to do is take our blue cake and place it as best as I can in the middle of our cake round. A few things that I've picked up in my research. Place the uneven or cut side down so that your flattest side is facing up. And then I will peel off my parchment paper and just throw that away. And now, using our piping bag with a nice large round tip, I'm going to pipe buttercream around the edges of the blue cake, starting with the outside edge and working in until the top is completely covered. And a reminder to myself and to you, let's take our time and do our best. And by the best, I mean as long as buttercream is on the cake, then we have accomplished our goal. Using a offset spatula or a knife, I'm just going to smooth out the buttercream so that there's no gaps and so that I'm filling in the hole that I left after I ran out of buttercream. And the goal is to make this as flat as possible. So what I'm doing now is called a crumb coat. And a crumb coat is exactly what it sounds like. It is a very thin layer of icing applied to the outside of the cake, specifically to seal in any loose crumbs, which prevents loose crumbs from mincing with the final decorations. So what I'm doing here, I'm actually gonna get my piping bag back because I think that'll be easier to sort of fill in some of these gaps to use the piping bag. And then I'll take my offset spatula and just make the outside of the cake smooth, basically. And this should, in theory, help make that final decorative coat of icing look really nice. All of my cake layers are nicely stacked. There's not really any gaps in between the layers, which was a concern of mine. And I have what I consider a very nice thin layer of buttercream covering all of my cakes. Just for reference, that is how much buttercream I have left to decorate the cake. I think it's gonna be tight, but we're gonna do our best. I think using the frozen cakes was super helpful. I didn't really notice that they started to put off any crumbs until actually right there at the end, which is when the cake started to defrost quite a bit. So definitely recommend freezing your cakes, letting them hang out in the freezer for a couple of days, and then frosting them. I am going to pop this in the freezer for about 20 minutes, just so that icing can firm up and the crumb coating can firm up, and then I'll come back and it will be time for the fun part, which is decorating. So I'll be back in about 20 minutes. Here we have our 3-tiered cake, and I am so excited. This looks so good after its little rest in the freezer. And now it is time to decorate. So we've got our buttercream here, got our offset spatula, and I'm just going to slowly but surely take this over the sides of the cake. But my goal, my top priority is to make sure that the top of the cake has a nice layer of buttercream on it, and then sort of waterfall that over the sides to make a nice smooth edge. And I'm not sweating getting the buttercream all the way necessarily to the bottom of the cake layers because I'm putting our bunny Peeps down there. So it'll cover most of that. Well, darn it, if that doesn't look so stinking cute. Now, when it comes to decorating, by all means, make this your own. I'm gonna add the Peeps because for me, nothing says a Peeps cake quite like bunny Peeps. So if you wanna use the bunny Peeps, I have here the blue, pink, and yellow bunny Peeps, not the chicks, the bunnies. And I'm just going to stand them up on the outside edge of the cake, alternating between the colors, starting with blue, and create a little border around the outside of my cake. With my impeccably clean hands, a final bunny smush into the cake. What I'm going to do next is I have some unsweetened coconut flakes here that I have dyed a lovely shade of green, and I have my chocolate mini eggs, and I'm just going to place some of these coconut flakes on the middle of my cake here. And again, this is optional. It's your cake, make it how you want. And then, time to add our eggs. In this piping bag, we've got the last little bit of our buttercream. I have a star tip here, and I'm gonna pipe whatever frosting I have left into some swirlies. And I hope it's enough. Oh gosh, we're gonna be so close. I don't know that we're gonna make it. Oh boy. Oh gosh, is cake stress a thing? Look at that, I have one little spot and then I'm decorated fully. Let's see what I got. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm literally like pushing into this piping tip to get out every last iota. Oh my gosh, I did it. I cannot believe this cake. Oh my gosh. Look at my piping bag. That is how much I had to get all the icing out of the bag to finish this cake, but no regrets. It is so cute. I could not be more proud of this cake. It is so sweet and fun. Look at all those bunny Peeps. They're so cute. And I love how the inside of the cake turned out. Look at all those fun, bright colors. My goodness. I am exceptionally impressed with how even the cake layers ended up, and that buttercream icing came together so easily. I still can't believe I used every last drop of that. I mean, I was really scraping the bottom of the bowl to get my little swirly dollops on top of the cake. But look at that result. Gosh, I could not be more pleased with it. And I seriously and sincerely hope that you give this bake a try. Look at that. That is such a nice crumb on the cake and a really nice buttercream layer separating my cake layers. Anyway, enough chit-chatting. Let's give this guy a taste. Oh my goodness. Wow. That is wonderful. That cake is so delicious, and that buttercream is out of this world. I would be proud to bring this and set it on any dessert table, and I cannot wait to share this with my friends and family. Anyway, I could clearly go on and on about this cake. Let me know in the comments below when you give this a try, what challenges you may have faced, and the successes that you had with this bake. I am off to find a hot cup of coffee to go with this delicious slice of cake. Thank you so much for being with me here today. And remember, trying new things is messy and sometimes a little intimidating, but the end result can be pretty sweet. Have a great rest of your day. Bye now.